Hello, everybody. My name is Bryce Webb, and I'm here to present to you the topic of mental illnesses. And today we're going to be examining the history and the impact of various mental illnesses, disorders, and mental health as a whole. To begin, we want to start with the definition of mental illness, which is defined by the American Psychology Association as a health condition which involves change in emotion, thinking, or behavior. Can be associated with distress and or problems in functioning in social, work, or family activities. So, for example, in social activities, being at school and not getting along with the kids or your peers, at work, not being able to complete the task at hand or being slow to do so in family activities, not being able to plan correctly, or just doing things that's out of the norm in general. That's all symptoms and signs of mental disorders or mental issues, which will all be addressed. And so to begin, we're going to go into the history of mental illnesses, and the term in mental illness was not used until the 19th century. And in ancient Egypt, we see records from around 1500 BC, which describe people with symptoms of mental illnesses. And that tells me that mental health issues and disparities have been around since the beginning of time, since we necessarily didn't have the knowledge to know what exactly it was. But we do understand that there was something wrong and something out of the ordinary going on inside the brain. Early methods of treatment for mental disorders included trephination, which is shown in the right picture, and it's basically when you dug holes into the skull of the victim or the patient, and this was done as it believed to cure the patient of any mental health issues or anything like that, and also release spirits, as again, mental health disorders were seen as quite spiritual in ancient Egypt and early humanhood. Mental health disorders were seen as punishment from God. And mentally ill women were persecuted as witches. In the 13th century, this coincided with the Salem witch trials, in which people who were suffering, specifically women who were suffering from mental illnesses, they did things that were not according to societal norms, which made them out to be the scapegoat of a witch. And mental hospitals and asylums began to appear in the 16th century as well. Moving right along to the Enlightenment era, which is the 18th century, we see a shift in the perception of mental illnesses, and we begin to understand that it is not it's not cutting paste. The mental illnesses in the brain is much more complex than it is than we once knew it as, and we knew that the nervous system is very detailed and intricate. Moving on to the 20th century methods, we see aversion therapy, which was briefly touched upon in A Clockwork Orange, which was a film that featured a young boy who had a lot of troubles and issues with their behavior, and he was shown a series of videos that involved heavy gore and very harsh actions and traumatic things, followed by very heartwarming things. And this combination of things were done in order to scare him into not doing those activities again. But aversion therapy in real life isn't like that. However, aversion therapy is just a simple feature of getting the brain to realize that their actions are not okay. Lobotomy, which was pictured in the bottom, is basically sticking a needle through their nose to touch the brain, and this created a small incision in the brain, which essentially turned them into a vegetable, and they were not able to do anything else. They lost all of their quality of life, and basically their free will was taken away because of the fact that they struggled from any mental health disorders, and that was a treatment, but it was very inhumane, and that did more harm than good. Also, there was psychotherapy, which was done to help a person identify and change healthy, unhealthy emotions. And with that's something that's still around today, psychotherapy. But we also see more Freudian approaches and theories, as well as the acknowledgement by Gen Z that, especially amongst the younger crowd, young adults, that mental health is a very real thing and something to be taken seriously and not lightly. So moving right along. This brings us to my first question, which is how do you think the past treatments of mental illness have influenced the treatment methods today? And I personally feel like the inhumaneness of lobotomies and trephination, and we see how it did so much more damage than it did good for the patients that suffered from these issues and these treatments. Once seeing that, then I know that today the doctors of today will look back and evolve their treatment methods and their approaches in a way that would greatly just improve the quality of life for the patient after treatment. So, with that being said, moving on to modern day mental health treatments, and we see an increase in the diagnosis of different mental health disorders around the time of COVID-19. And this quote from the World Health Organization says, in the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, global prevalence of anxiety and depression increased by a massive 25%. This is a quote from the World Health Organization again, and we want to examine the effects of social media on mental health, specifically cyberbullying. And this quote says, the victims of cyberbullying may develop depressive symptoms and insomnia from PubMed. And we see very commonly around young adults or younger people in general, cyberbullying is a huge problem. Could lead people down a wrong path. It could lead people down many issues and just possible conflicts and anxieties about themselves. And then while staying on the topic of young adults, we want to mention the suicidal rates and how suicide occurs throughout the lifespan and was the third leading cause of death among 15 through 29-year-olds globally in 2021, which is another quote from the World Health Organization. And again, social media isn't the cardinal factor as does play a factor, however, but it is not the cardinal reason for that. More on mental health in the modern day, we see from 2011 to 2021, teen girls in the U.S. reported a 60% increase in depressive symptoms. And this is from the CDC, and that, again, partially has something to do with the need to fit in from social media, but also just has to do with a lot of societal, biological factors as well. So that's not a clear-cut answer. Then we see stereotypes in the media, and we often see in shows, TV shows, Netflix movies, anything like that, where a person could be talking to themselves or yelling at themselves and acting all erratic and showing signs of psychotic behavior. And they're painted as a stereotypical view of schizophrenia when 9 times out of 10 in real life, although those are symptoms, that's not how a manic or psychotic episode of a person struggling with schizophrenia would look like. So that's a huge issue in today's media, but again, it's done for entertainment. And we also want to touch on the disparities in care. So Black and Hispanic adults receive mental health treatment at lower rates than white adults, despite similar or higher rates of mental health conditions. And this is a result of a survey that was done, or a study that was done. And this can be explained with a lot of factors, not specifically that is based off of racial alone, but as well as the genetic makeup, the background that they were raised in, where they come from, and the type of access to healthcare that they had. Which brings me to my next question, which is question 2. Do you think increased social media usage has helped or hurt mental health conversations? And I personally feel like it has done both, but it's done more harm than good in the sense of mental health, because although it brung to light and I brung awareness to different mental health concerns, we see an overwhelming pressure of people trying to fit in and be with the new trend, which could easily lead to problems or issues with identity and themselves. It could lead to eating disorders as they don't feel like their body image matches what is the trend or what is normal in society nowadays. So I feel like in that aspect it's done a lot more harm than good. Moving on to my third question, which is the quote, "There's no health without mental health." And this means to me that mental health is so important. If your mind isn't right, if you're not in the right state of mind, and the quality of life you're going to have and going to lead is going to be very difficult, very trying. And you're going to really have to put the work in, put the effort in, when at the end of the day, your mental health is so important, and everything follows suit behind your brain activity, and behind your mental health. So it's very important. With that being said, this is my final slide. It's about the call to action, and I want to normalize conversations in which everybody is struggling. Mental health should not be a taboo topic, or not should not be a hush hush topic, because everybody is struggling, everybody is going through something, and we all need to come together and know that we need to get the right help that we need, instead of being selfish or being scared to talk out about our problems. You want to educate yourself and educate others, because at the end of the day, you could be giving somebody the push that they need to go get that mental help that would very much benefit their life, as well as educating yourself and giving you the push, even though you may be stubborn, giving you the push to go and get yourself some help, which would be so much better. And last but not least, the number one thing I say is to take care of yourself and prioritize your mental health, because you cannot help others if you can't help yourself. And that's a very important rule for me. And you want to, at the end of the day, be the type of change that you want to see in the world, no matter what. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of my presentation. This final slide is just my reference slide. So once again, thank you for being here and listening.